another key area of difference is the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act tore down the wall that prohibited law enforcement and intelligence authorities from sharing information about terrorist threats. Think about this. Before 9/11, if the CIA got some information about something bad happening in the United States, they couldn't talk to the FBI. If the FBI found out something that they needed to learn more about from the CIA, they couldn't talk to them. There was a wall literally put in place between domestic and international intelligence agencies. We tore down that wall. The Patriot Act also allowed investigators to pursue terrorists with tools they already used against other criminals. Think about this. Before 9/11, law enforcement had an easier time tracking the telephone contacts of a drug dealer than an international terrorist. Before 9/11 and before the Patriot Act, it was easier for law enforcement to get the credit card receipts of a tax cheat than to get them of a terrorist, of an al-Qaeda financier. Prior to the Patriot Act, before 9/11, federal agents could follow the calls of mobsters when they switched cell phones. You watch The Sopranos, use a cell phone and discard it. They had a thing called a roving wiretap. I took a little umbrage at the title, roving. But they had a roving wiretap that allowed them to follow criminals who discard telephones like that, cell phones like that. But you know what? They couldn't use roving wiretaps on terrorists. What kind of crazy system is that? System with one standard for criminals and another standard for international terrorists. And this president said he was going to put an end to it. He said if it's good enough to be tough on the criminals, we can be just equally tough on the terrorists as well. For the last 5 years, the Patriot Act has helped protect America from another attack and saved American lives. And despite this, when it came up for reauthorization in December, Democrats threatened to filibuster, leading the Senate Democrat leader, old Harry Reid, to go out there on the steps of the United States Capitol and crow to the press, in front of the television cameras. Old Harry said that we Democrats had, quote, killed the Patriot Act. I think he spoke just a little prematurely. 2 months ago, the President signed the reauthorization of this vital law, despite the attempt of nearly every Senate Democrat to block it and the vote of 2/3 of House Democrats against it. America is safer. America has not been attacked since 9/11, and law enforcement is able to disrupt and arrest terrorist cells in our country because of this vital law, and Republican support and Democrat opposition to the Patriot Act can be a big issue in the fall elections and ought to be. Because of a New York Times story, our enemies now know that in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, President Bush authorized the National Security Agency to intercept communications where A, one of the parties is outside the United States of America, and B, there is a reasonable basis to conclude that the conversation involves a member of or somebody affiliated with al-Qaeda. Seems like a pretty common sense idea. The purpose of the terrorist surveillance program is to protect American lives, and the President's actions are both legal and fully consistent with the Fourth Amendment and the protection of our civil liberties. Congressional leaders from both parties have been briefed more than a dozen times over the years about the program. Courts have consistently recognized an American president's authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to order warrantless searches. And Democrats and Republicans agree that the power to order warrantless searches exists, and some of the strongest offenders are Clinton's CIA director and Clinton's associate attorney general. Yet some leading Democrats in Congress have made false and reckless charges against this president, and some, including the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, have called for the president's impeachment and removal from office over this issue. Let me be clear as I can. I've known him for 33 years. He's a pretty straightforward guy. The President of the United States is sort of a simple, practical guy. He believes that if al-Qaeda is calling somebody in the United States of America, it is in our national security interest to know who they're calling and why. Democrats say they want that as well. It's just that they happen to vehemently oppose every step the President's taken to achieve that aim. I guess you could say they were in favor of listening in on al-Qaeda conversations before they were against listening in on al-Qaeda conversations. Yet this shows that at the core we're dealing with two different political parties who have fundamentally different views on national security. Republicans believe with deep conviction that we're at war, and that we need to treat this epic struggle like a war, because it is. Many Democrats, on the other hand, seem to view this much like Senator Kerry did and does. It's primarily a law enforcement issue. With respect to the sheriff, that's not all it is. Ask yourself one thing. Why are so many leading Democrats trying to impede rather than support our efforts? Why are so many Democrats, whether it's talking about winning the war in Iraq or passing the Patriot Act or maintaining the terrorist surveillance program, on the opposite side of what's in America's national security interest in this important war? Now, these are honest differences. The views that many Democrats hold don't make them unpatriotic, not at all. But it does make them wrong. Profoundly and utterly and consistently wrong on the most important issue facing our country today. I should mention that about a month or 6 weeks ago, the Democrats offered, quote, their national security platform. It's a document without substance or weight. What I enjoyed most, however, about it was that members of the Democratic Party, the party of George McGovern, Jimmy Carter, Walter Mondale, Ted Kennedy, John Kerry, and Howard Dean, insist that the President's policies have failed and that their policies outlined in this thin document are, quote, tough and smart, end quote. I don't know about you, but in Texas there's an old saying, you can put a lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Well, you can put lipstick on the Democrats' national security platform, but it's still the Democrats' national security platform. Their party is the party of high taxes at home and weakness and retreat abroad. And they cannot repackage their record no matter what cosmetics they use. They cannot erase what we all know to be true. Now, these are challenging days for our country. The last several years have been consequential and eventful ones. Our nation was struck on a quiet September morning. I'll never forget when my cell phone rang. We're sitting outside an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida. My assistant said to me, there's a report that a plane has flown into the World Trade Center. We don't know whether it's a small plane or a jet. We don't know whether it's commercial or private. And I went over at 8:48 p.m. on that bright September morning and told the President of the United States. And you saw the scene, you've seen it probably on television, of him being told by Andy Card that a second plane had flown into the World Trade Center. The President came out of that classroom after they finished reading to the kids so as not to upset them, and finished reading, and about a few moments later came into the room next to, wherever the President travels, they set up a room that has secure telephones in it. We found a television set, plugged it in, and we were there with the military aide, with the football and the communications people, and the President came in, and the first things he said is, we're at war, give me the Director of the FBI, give me the Vice President. Right from the first moment, he knew what it was. These past few years have seen our nation involved in 2 wars and an epic struggle against radical Islam. We've had to overcome an inherited recession and one of the worst natural disasters in America's history. And yet these challenging days have also been hopeful days. They're proud and memorable days in the history of America. And it's an extraordinary privilege to help shape the events of our time. And that's what you in this room did by helping to support a good man, not once, but in 2 presidential elections. So let me end where I began.